It's high time I told you about a story that will give you a bigger sack. Even if you're a female, it'll put hair in your chest, even if you don't want it to. The Searchers by Alan Lee May is a 1954 classic American Western novel. Sorry. So, a bunch of ranchers in Texas, their family wiped out by bad Comanches. Their daughter stolen as a sex object, taken somewhere. This obsessive, prejudice, Indian, racist, Indian killing, hating veteran Amos, frontiersman, and some orphan named Martin Pauly who's following him around to become the searchers to find Debbie Edwards, right? And then they just can't find her. It gets so epic and frustrating because they can't give up the search. This is the classic sort of heroic trope odyssey, right? Going all over the West, all over the place in circles. And at first you're like, yeah, cliche. This story can't weave a spell on me to make me care, but you just can't help it because it sneaks up on you. You find yourself being, the more time goes on, tedious passages, descriptions, searches, battles. Where the hell is she? You need, at a certain point around here or here, you need to know what happens. You need to know how this is going to turn out. And then it comes gripping in a very classy way. So, unlike the film adaptation, the famous John Wayne, John Ford cinema, like landmark of cinema that is the movie adaptation, the book is much better for me personally because, well, it just has so much more seeming high fidelity to this actual time in history because it's so much more sad and somber and brutal. And for example, you see that in the fact that Amos is not a heroic character, not truly, and the book does not shy away from the prejudice and the racism and showing the bad side of that throughout history. So many people might be, without truly reading or exploring the novel in detail, be tempted to judge it as being not politically relevant to the present, etc. And so, but even, it is especially driven home the point of, the unfortunate reality of certain mindsets in this time in history in America by the outcome, by the story's end, which is so memorable and unfortunate, yet oddly necessary in a way that will burn into your memory for better, maybe for worse. I don't know, but either way, the Searchers is there's boring parts in the story, but overall it's compelling, and there's a certain, I have a love-hate relationship with the dryness of the dialogue and the description, the lack of intellect or ideation of anything beyond day-to-day mortal survival in such a harsh environment, which is probably more truthful than most stories in this setting. There's very little humor. It is just a very earthy, somber tale that's not very joyful to read, but what it lacks in joy, the moment-to-moment reading process, it makes up for with the impact, the memorability of the outcome of the tragic, aspects of what ultimately comes to pass. There's also one scene in particular that is always burned out into my memory. The getting snowed in the canyon in the blizzard scene is so brutal and just doesn't let up. The moment-to-moment suspense and the beautiful prose. There's something beautiful about the intentionally simplistic, dry nature that really, so it has a very strong sense of voice that in a meta fashion stylistically grounds the story in a sense of reality that's it's going to be deliberately uncomfortable for most people who enjoy escapist fantasy. So compared against the movie, I would say the ending being much more different and much more tragic. The motives of the characters being totally different. Well, not totally different, but very different, as well as personalities. It's more sad, more somber, more brutal than the film, and therefore much better and more memorable. I liked the film as an escapist fantasy type thing for different reasons. This one came off as just a decent, more serious escape type of fiction. So I give The Searchers by Alan Lee May a solid 8 out of 10, recommended, a solid Western novel that isn't quite spectacular and isn't always totally believable, but plenty believable nonetheless. So I'm a little bit divided on that. It didn't blow my mind, but I found myself getting caught up in the story, even though I didn't always consistently enjoy it. And I want to see what I really want to see is a modern movie adaptation that gets like a P.T. Anderson treatment. That's like, I want to see the There Will Be Blood style version of The Searchers that really explores the darker aspects of the story. That is trying. It seemed to me that the author and the story to have the intention of doing a spiritual homage to how things really were at this time in history, with very little of the romantic, like, American biases and favoritism and cliches and silly prejudices that you saw in the 1950s movie adaptation. Although there's probably still small elements I didn't notice in the book, it just seemed, based on what I know of this time of history, much more realistic than the film. So, yeah, it's pretty good. Time to get back to work.